Koonic seeks Director of Major Gifts and Planned Giving to advance philanthropic support. Learn more at knba.org. Koonic seeks a General Manager of Media to lead content and operations. Learn more at knba.org.
Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. A slate of new tax changes could be added incentive to get your return finished early. There's a bigger standard deduction and an increased child tax credit this year. Tax organizations estimate the average refund could be about $1,000. We'll look at what's different this year and changes that you should be aware of. That's all coming up after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Brian Bull, sitting in for Antonia Gonzalez. Tribal leaders from across the country are gathered in Washington, D.C. this week for the National Congress of American Indians 2026 Winter Session and State of Indian Nations Address. NCI Youth Commission co-presidents Jonas Canusa and Angelina Cerna kicked off Monday morning's assembly by delivering the Youth Commission speech. Cerna says her message to tribal leaders is to recognize the contributions being made by Native youth.
I really talk about tokenism when it comes to Native youth and really putting youth at the forefront and having youth at these tables, at these conversations, and giving youth that opportunity to really learn, but also for the adults to be learners and teachers as well, and incorporating language and culture in everything that we do, because what we do has spirit and has a purpose.
Canusa says his message to attendees is to help find ways for Native youth to get more opportunities, especially for those who live in remote areas.
Opening roles for more Native youth. I think Native youth in rural reservations have a hard time maybe connecting to maybe internships, fellowships, maybe just early on new jobs, entry jobs, because of those location barriers.
The Youth Commission co-presidents also touched on safety concerns when it comes to Native people and recent federal immigration actions across the U.S. They also talked about the Commission's work this week on Capitol Hill to advocate for funding, harm reduction, treatment, and recovery models for substance abuse. NCI President Mark Macaro, who delivered the State of Indian Nation speech, followed the Youth Commission's remarks by saying young Native people are an important part of the NCAI.
In my time here at NCAI, the youth started to say, we have a voice. What we have to say matters, and it matters in this moment. And, we took stock of that and been making strides to have them be more inclusive. They're right. And their take on the world, their take on issues in Indian country is different than ours. We need to allow ourselves to hear that, but we also need to create those opportunities for us to mentor them.
NCAI's winter session continues Tuesday with updates from federal agencies, including the Departments of Justice, Transportation, and Housing. Leaders will also hear from some members of Congress from New Mexico and Washington State. The history and effects of Indian boarding schools will be investigated and documented under legislation reintroduced by Oklahoma Republican Congressman Tom Cole and Kansas Democratic Representative Sharice Davids. Cole is a member of the Chickasaw Nation, while Davids is a member of the Ho-Chunk Nation of Wisconsin. She's one of the first two Native women elected to Congress and has long spoken of the boarding school era, including on C-SPAN in 2022.
The policies and assimilation practices of the United States had the sole purpose of culturally assimilating American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian children in residential boarding schools across the country. Children were coerced and compelled to attend boarding schools away from their home. Many children did not return to their families or their communities. Those that did return lost generations worth of cultural knowledge, stories, and traditions, and communities lost their language keepers, cultural practitioners, and future leaders.
House Resolution 7325 would establish a commission to investigate and report on the histories of more than 500 federally run boarding schools, which operated between 1819 through the 1970s. And on this day in 1763, the French-Indian War officially ended. The armies of France and England wrestled for territory in the Americas, with both sides swaying native tribes to help their efforts. Some, including the Ojibwe and Winnebago, helped the French, while the Iroquois helped England. While the outcome was favorable for the British, the costs of the war compelled England to raise taxes on the 13 colonies, eventually spurring the American Revolution. This is National Native News. I'm Brian Bull.
National Native News is produced by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation, with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Hear that? Tribal college faculty do so much, one can't say it all here. Nothing but respect. Visit mostthoroughdjobdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
Tribal Development Partners, helping tribes build toward their goals through 105L leasing and essential facility development, empowering sovereignty, strengthening community. More at tribaldevpartners.com, proud supporters of this show.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. New changes in the tax law means millions of Americans will get bigger tax refunds this year. Right off the bat, there is a larger standard deduction and an expanded deduction for elders. Parents might be eligible for a slightly higher child tax credit, and some workers who make tips might qualify for the new no tax on tips deduction. There are other changes to take note of, too, including the move away from paper checks, which will require some additional work for those without traditional bank accounts. And some advocates worry recent staff reductions at the IRS might mean difficulty getting questions answered. In this hour, we'll talk with certified tax preparers who work with Native American taxpayers about getting ready and knowing what to look for as the filing deadline approaches. You can join us with your comments or questions by calling 1-800-996-2848. That number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Joining us now from Flagstaff, Arizona is Leslie McLean. She is the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic Director for DNA People's Legal Services. Leslie, good morning. Welcome to Native America Calling.
Good morning, Sean, and thanks for letting us be here today and share some information with your listeners.
Absolutely. Also on the show today, we have Chelsea Sosi. She is a Christine A. Brunswick Public Service Fellow with DNA People's Legal Services, Low Income Taxpayer Clinic, and she is Dene. Chelsea, good morning to you as well. Welcome to the show.
Oh, good morning. Hello.
It's great to have both of you on today. And Leslie, I'm going to begin with you. I think what's on a lot of people's minds right now, should most of us expect a larger tax refund this year? And if so, how much larger?
Yeah, well, so that's what we're hearing, right? That folks should expect on average a $1,000 refund, which is interesting because your refund really depends on, how much federal withholding you've had, whether you're eligible for the child tax credit, and the earned income credit. And of course, those credits have increased. The child tax credit was raised this year to $2,200 per child, which can lower, but you have to pay in what your tax liability is. And it's also a portion of that's refundable. Limited to $1,700 per child. So what that means is even if you don't have a tax liability, you will get a refund, up to $1,700 per child. And that's true for the earned income tax credit also. It's a refundable credit. So that's why it's important to file your tax return so you can get those credits. I think to say an average of $1,000 refund is it's a little difficult to say because that average means some people won't get any refund and other people will get a very large refund. So it's best just to go and have your taxes done, or if you're able to do them yourself, so you can make sure you're getting the highest refund that you're eligible for.
Leslie, sometimes I've heard people say, you shouldn't get too big a refund, because if your refund is a huge amount, it means you're paying too much estimated tax, or you're having too much tax withheld from your biweekly or monthly paycheck, whatever it is. What's your thought on that? Is because I meet people, they get like a $4,000, $5,000 refund. They're super excited, but then they don't always really realize like that's their money, right? It was always their money all along. It was just prepaid to IRS.
Exactly, Sean. I remember when I prepared tax returns more regularly earlier in my career, and then as a VITA volunteer, when people would be excited about getting their big refunds, I would say, well, but wait a minute, you could have had that money all year long. Let's look at your W-4, right? That's a form that folks fill out for their employer to determine how much money they should have withheld. And let's just make sure that you're having enough. It's okay to have, some room in there so you get a small refund. But when you're right, when you're starting to get, $4,000 or $5,000 refund, couldn't you have budgeted that better and use that more effectively and efficiently for yourself and your family? Yeah. The other side of that argument, though, Sean, is unfortunately in our clinic, we help folks who are getting notices from the IRS, right? So we help folks resolve their controversies, and a lot of those controversies are collections, and that's because taxpayers haven't had enough withheld from their pay. And then, the worst thing you can have happen as a tax preparer is to have to tell someone, they owe $5,000 to the IRS.
Right. Yeah, that's nobody's favorite message to have to deliver. Leslie, this whole no tax on tips, that's getting a lot of buzz too. A lot of people are interested, especially those of us who work in the service industry. What can you tell us about that? What are the details?
Yeah. So first of all, you have to have received those tips and occupations that the IRS identified as customarily and regularly receiving tips. And there is a list of those, classifications of workers that will determine whether or not you qualify for this. That's the first, hurdle. The next is that these tips must be reported on a W-2 form, and or a Form 1099, which it would make sense that you would only worry about being able to exclude them if they were reported, right, on those forms. You can also there's another statement furnished to taxpayers. A Form 4137. So any of those can be used to report your tips. And then the maximum annual deduction for tips is $25,000. So we'll see how it goes. This is the first year that this is going to happen.
Yeah, right. And you say tips that are actually reported on W-2. So let's say somebody's like a delivery driver and they get cash tips completely, there's no record of that. Should they still be reporting that income?
Well, I can't say they shouldn't be, to be honest with you, right? Because, as taxpayers, as U.S. citizens, we're required to report all of our income, and there's a very brief definition of what income is. And it's basically anything that, increases your value, so clearly even cash tips. I'm not going to answer the question, should you? Do people? Well,
okay.
Let's guess, right?
All right. We'll do that. We'll guess. Overtime pay. How is that going to work?
Sure. So this was, this is a little trickier than tips, I think, because not all overtime, only a portion that exceeds the regular rate of pay. So let's say you've worked your 40 hours and then you're working 41 hours, right? And your overtime rate is, oh boy, here's going to be the challenge. Okay, let's say you get paid $20 an hour regularly. Then your overtime rate at time and a half is going to be $30, right? The only part of that that's excludable from tax is the $10, the half, right? So it's not like all of your overtime. So that's a little complicated. It too must be reported on a W-2 W-2 or a Form 1099 or another statement furnished to the taxpayer. The maximum annual deduction for that is $12,500.
Okay. And I read this year it might be kind of difficult for some people because they're going to have to go back through their pay stubs and determine what was regular pay, what was overtime. But starting next year, is this correct that employers will be required to report overtime pay on W-2s?
That is correct. That's exactly right.
All right. Well, that should help out, make the record keeping a lot easier for a lot of folks. Do you have any gauge for how many people, like in a state like Arizona, will be able to take advantage of this deduction for overtime pay?
So just from experience in preparing tax returns, and most of the time over the past years, the only place I'm really doing that is in the Navajo communities, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen anyone with tips on their W-2 or their 1099. I can't recall any, Sean, right now, right? Overtime, that's a little harder for me to know because, overtime was always just reported in your gross wages in box 1 of your W-2, right? So it was just lumped in with all of your other pay. So how many folks are getting paid overtime? That's really hard to gauge at this point. How many people will benefit from these new deductions or exclusions from income? Certainly some will, but because of the record keeping required and the complications, I don't think we're going to see that right away. I do know folks who are trained as volunteer income tax assistants, preparers have been trained in those two areas. So folks are looking out for it, and hopefully we can help people who need help with that.
Listeners, do you have any questions with regard to filing your taxes this year? If so, give us a call. We have people who can answer your questions. The number is 1-800-996-2848. The number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Let us know if you have had a chance to file your taxes so far already this year. Maybe you were quick to get on it when the filing season opened up in January, and let us know, did it go easily for you? Was it a smooth process? Did any of these changes create any hiccups or any challenges for you? We'd like to hear about it. 1-800-996-2848. On the show today, we have Leslie McLean and also Chelsea Sosi, both with DNA People's Legal Services Low-Income Taxpayer Clinic. So stay with us. We'll be back after this short break. We'll talk more with our guests and get more information for you folks with regard to filing an accurate and timely tax return this year. The original Route 66 welcomed the birth of the American road trip. Stretching from Chicago to Santa Monica, it was a boon to Native-led tourism, some of which continues today. But it also fed stereotypes and Native land grabs. This year marks 100 years since the construction of Route 66, and we'll look at the difference it made down the road on the next Native America Calling.
Support by the American Indian College Fund. The American Indian College Fund provides millions of dollars of scholarships to thousands of Native students every year. Tribal citizens of every age and experience are eligible. The deadline for applications is May 31st, and you can find everything you need to apply at collegefund.org. That's collegefund.org, or by phone at 800-766-FUND. Education is the answer.
Thank you for tuning in to Native America Calling. We are talking about getting the most out of your tax return. Are you prepared for this year's changes to various credits and deductions? If you have questions, you can speak with our certified tax preparers. The number at our studio is 1-800-996-2848. That is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. One of our guests today, Chelsea Sosi, is a certified tax preparer with DNA People's Legal Services Low Income Taxpayer Clinic. And Chelsea, before we went to break, we were talking with your colleague Leslie, and we went over the increased child tax credit. We talked about no taxes on tips, and also how overtime income could also see some deductions with regard to taxable income. But there's a lot more to talk about here. What are some other common tax credits or deductions that people should be paying attention to this year?
Well, one thing we always encourage people to look into is whether they are eligible for credits like the Earned Income Tax Credit or the Child Tax Credit. That's a credit that can help reduce what you owe, or even help you to get a refund for the year. It's often a misconception that just because you are not required to file, it doesn't mean you won't receive a refund. So, once you're calculating what you owe, you subtract what you held that year, then that's when those credits become important. And then, so you want to make sure that even though you're not required to file, you might still receive a refund, and that could be something that could help during the tax season.
Still makes sense to file a return. Yeah, thanks. That's good information. You mentioned the Earned Income Tax Credit, EITC. Tell us more about how that works. What kind of taxpayer will qualify for that credit, and what's a typical EITC credit that they might actually see on their return, the amount?
Sure. So taxpayers can claim the Earned Income Tax Credit with or without qualifying children. The qualifications are that you have to be age 25 through 64, you live in the U.S. for over half the year, and you can't be claimed by as a dependent by another person. For 2025, the maximum credit is $649, and then there are income thresholds, and to be able, the maximum income for that is $19,104, I believe. And then it phases depending on your filing status, how many dependents you have, and your income as well.
And once you reach a certain income threshold, you're no longer eligible for the EITC. Is that how it works?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Chelsea, when someone comes into your office and files their return, what's the process? What's the first step? What do you look at? What kind of questions do you ask them? And what do you ask them to bring along to the appointment?
Well, so the Low-Income Taxpayer Clinic doesn't prepare current year returns. We help people with prior year controversies more often. But when we advise people to go into FIDA clinics and such, people should bring in all of their financial income documents, W-2s, 1099-Rs, Social Security statements, and any other information that is reported on an IRS tax form. Additionally, you should also bring in information we may need for preparing the return, like your Social Security cards, any birth certificates if you're claiming any children, just so we have that information in the event of an audit.
Okay. Now, I know, Chelsea, in the past there have been businesses, especially there, some of the border towns and such, that have taken advantage of taxpayers during filing season. I don't know how active those businesses are these days, but what are some scams or just some bad business practices that we need to be mindful of when filing our returns, when going to a paid preparer?
Right. So generally, commercial preparers like to set up in border towns of tribal nations. And this is a big issue because a lot of commercial preparers don't have the certifications that other organizations like Volunteer Income Tax Assistance and Tribal Council, Tax Counseling for Elderlies do. Right now, there are no regulations for commercial preparers to be enrolled agents. So sometimes that can lead to bad returns, and then they impose high interest preparation loans and advertise those to people who could use the money right away. But, you know, people, I can say for my experience culturally, they like to have that face-to-face interaction. So even more when it's with people we know. But couple that with historically higher rates of poverty and unemployment on tribal nations, it's easy for people to seek out options that might be free or try to find the biggest refund.
Okay.
And, you know, that
Yeah, and you mentioned the refund anticipation loan products that some of those businesses have offered in the past. And I'm just curious nowadays, because I can remember back in the day when everybody, you know, they mailed their tax return and then they waited for a check in the mail. But now you've got, you know, electronic filing, you have direct deposit. So it seems like, at least in my case, the refunds, they come back a lot quicker than they used to back in the day. So is there even a need for a refund anticipation loan just to save a few days maybe in some cases? What's your thought?
I think there are still higher rates of poverty and unemployment and lack of resources on tribal nations that still hinder the return of the turnaround of a refund. You know, and often with more low-income taxpayers, there's the barrier of access to technology and access to internet, where it can make e-filing a little bit harder, let alone access tax preparation software through the IRS website. Even more so, you know, a lot of reservations that have greater areas often have issues with postal services, things getting lost in the mail, and having closer access to those types of services. So it could still be sort of an issue when it comes to tribal nations because there are less resources available due to those barriers.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense for sure, Chelsea. What drew you into a career in tax law? I'm interested to know, and also what types of cases or what types of issues do you see, especially with Native folks who have an issue with with their taxes to the point that they need to get legal representation for it?
Yeah, what interested me in a career in tax law, I kind of just fell into it, you know, but the reason behind that was because I met Leslie McLean after I had reached out to her to apply for this fellowship. And, you know, after some talking and discussion, this was something that I saw myself doing, contributing economic development benefits to a community that I grew up in. And so now that me and Leslie work together, we are in the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic at DNA. We work on tax controversies that can include anything you can think of after you file a return. Typically, that starts when you receive an IRS notice or you haven't received a refund. In addition to that, we can represent taxpayers in U.S. tax court for any issues that may reach that level of service. We also work on the front end. We tend to try to bring education opportunities to the different communities that DNA serves, and we also participate in various outreach to communities to see what kind of issues people are facing throughout the nation.
Thanks, Chelsea. The phone number, if you have a question to ask with regard to filing taxes this year, or maybe just a comment to share, 1-800-996-2848. How many of you have filed your tax return already? If so, we'd like to hear about your experience. 1-800-99-NATIVE. Let's go back to Leslie McLean, who is the Low-Income Taxpayer Clinic Director for DNA, People's Legal Services. And Leslie, earlier I mentioned how back in the day I can remember mailing off a paper return and getting my refund check in the mail. But I know an executive order from the president has phased out physical mail for tax returns. So how do you see that affecting taxpayers and those who expect to get refunds from IRS this year?
Yeah, Sean, that's a real concern for our taxpayers. You know, a large percentage of our taxpayers are unbanked, so that becomes a problem of how are they going to get their refund. And so, from what I understand, paper checks can still be issued. You need to specifically, state a reason why you need to get a paper check, and it will take longer to get a paper check refund that it has in the past. Fortunately, there are some banks, and I won't mention any by name, that have things called like focus cards where you can get, you'll have a routing number and an account number, and it's a card that you can have your refund put onto. I think other cash apps like Venmo, I think, might also allow folks to get a card that's associated with a routing number and a bank account number so that they can use that for that purpose. So this is going to be a real transitional year. This is a year that, we're going to have to really work with folks on trying to get them to be able to receive digital refunds for many reasons. And, when you were talking to Chelsea earlier about, the refund anticipation loans and the different products that are available for really, in my opinion, high costs, right? So we've seen families spend up to $1,000 for their tax prep, for either direct, a card, a bank card that they get with it for a refund anticipation loan. And, that's $1,000 that they could have kept in their pocket for their families. So it really does behoove us to help our taxpayers get in a position where they can electronically receive their refunds.
$1,000 to file a tax return. How do they itemize that? I mean, how do they justify that high a fee for a tax return?
Sure. So, some commercial preparers charge by form, right? So if you're getting an earned income credit, there's a lot of forms there, right? And so that makes the return more expensive. So for our families who are getting earned income credit, child tax credit, it's, charge per form. However, you put this information, anyone who's used tax filing software knows you put this information in, and these forms self-generate themselves mostly. I mean, you have to ask the taxpayer some questions. And like Chelsea said, that's why we like to have, face-to-face contact with taxpayers so that we can ask them about things, that are that are going to have an impact on their refund. But yeah, absolutely. Easily I've seen returns, and then I've seen the itemized bill from the preparer where they've been close to $1,000, if not $1,000. And so there's, if you need to pay your tax prep fees from your refund, there's a charge for that, right? Because then the refund funnels first through to the tax preparer so they can take out their portion. If you're getting an advance, some folks will get an advance on their refund from the preparer. There is a charge for that, and then don't forget interest also that gets charged on that.
Thanks, Leslie. Chelsea, what are your thoughts for people just filing their own tax returns and not going to a preparer like DNA low-income taxpayer clinic or a paid preparer in a border town? They just want to do it themselves. Do you recommend that? And if so, or if not, why not? What do they need to be paying attention to?
Well, if possible, we do recommend using the software if you're not eligible for free filing services such as the VITA or the tax counseling for the elderly. The software is the easiest way to navigate the tax return for people who have simple returns, that being maybe a couple of W-2s. Those can be just so helpful. They calculate everything on the back end, and that's often the best option. If you have to use a paid preparer, we do recommend finding preparers who are enrolled agents. These preparers have to take a certification test similar to those who volunteer to prepare returns. And that might also include extra hours of classes so that a return is prepared properly and is very well understood.
All right. Thank you. Chelsea Sosi, tax attorney on the show today with DNA People's Legal Services Low Income Taxpayer Clinic. We're going to take another short break. We'll come back. We've got a caller who's going to join us, and others who would like to call in as well. Just pick up your phone, 1-800-996-2848. Tax questions. We've got answers for you today.
Tribal Development Partners, helping tribes build toward their goals through 105L leasing and essential facility development, empowering sovereignty, strengthening community. More at tribaldevpartners.com, proud supporters of this show.
Kaufman & Associates has over 35 years of experience serving Indian country, supporting growth, transformation, and sustainability of tribal programs. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
We're glad you're along today on Native America Calling. We're talking about taxes. The deadline to file is Wednesday, April 15th, and this is an early reminder to know what to expect with changes in the filing process. The number to join the conversation, 1-800-996-2848. I just want to let you folks know if you have any very, very specific questions related to specific returns or specific situations that you encounter, you should probably consult with a specific tax professional where you live. All right. But we do have people on the show who can answer general questions and give us a lot of insights and help us to prepare for when we file this year. And with that, we've got a caller on the line. This is Ed, who is listening on Keeley Radio in Pine Ridge, South Dakota. Hello, Ed. How you doing?
I'm good. Pretty good. Just traveling, listening.
Have you filed your tax return yet, Ed?
I'm going to Pine Ridge. Well, I'm kind of like I don't want to file because I filed on one and they said I have a forgiveness plan, they said. A car, I guess. I turned it in, so they added that value of that car to my income. Now I owe $4,800. Is that legal? Is that possible?
Oh, I think you're talking about like maybe it was a car loan or something like that that was forgiven and they turn around and they consider that taxable income. Maybe you got a 1099 for that. Did you get a 1099?
I never got one. They
Okay, let's see what Chelsea has to say. Chelsea, what does Ed need to be paying attention to here? The forgiveness, $4,000 plus. Can you help us out?
Yeah, so it does sound like what we call the cancellation of debt type of income. Typically, how that works is if you had a loan, in this case on the car, that was forgiven, the loaner itself should issue a 1099-C. That will list the amount of income that was reported to the IRS that was forgiven, and the IRS does consider that income because of the benefit of not having to pay it off.
Okay. So that's the other side of this here. Forgiven the debt, but then of course it's considered income. Ed, do you have any idea what car dealership we're talking about, or the loan company? Or do you have any information on where this would come from?
Yeah, it wasn't Grand. It was oh man, I can't remember their name right offhand. But yeah, that's what the loans. I mean, the IRS says I don't know if I even want to file. I just got to set up a payment plan, I guess. So.
Okay. Well, Chelsea, Ed's got doubts about maybe filing, but what does he need to know? Is that a smart move just to not file?
Well, generally, it's something you're required to report when you file your return, and there are some options you can take a look at, or if you know of a local tax professional who can help you. But some of those options are, taking a look at what insolvency exceptions you might be eligible for. If you were insolvent at the time that debt was canceled, you might be able to file a form to exempt that income from your gross income. So that's one option that you might be able to look into if you want to speak with a tax professional.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Ed, good luck with what you're pursuing there, looking into this information. And Chelsea, a person like you, a Native American tax attorney representing folks in Native communities, are there a lot of other people like you doing this kind of work? Again, because here's Ed up in South Dakota, and we've got listeners all over the country.
Well, there are 145-ish low-income taxpayer clinics nationally, but as far as I know, I'm the only one who is a tribal member and works within the community that I come from.
Okay.
And Sure. So the low-income taxpayer clinic here at DNA is also one of the few that services Northern Arizona, which encapsulates the Navajo Nation, the Hopi Nation. We also service Hickory Apache and the Havasupai Nation as well.
Okay. So if somebody just Googles low-income taxpayer clinic, can they get information on where one might be located near them?
Yeah, there are locators for low-income taxpayer clinics within different states.
All right, wonderful. Let's go back to the phones. This is Sam, and she is listening in Albuquerque on KUNM. Hi, Sam. What's on your mind?
Well, I guess I kind of got the answer. I'm actually homeless now, and I'm just trying to figure out where I can get my taxes done.
Okay. Yeah. Chelsea, what else can we share with Sam with regard to her situation?
Yeah, just like the locators for low-income taxpayer clinics, there are also free tax help locators on the IRS website. So you can go there, type in where you're located, and you should be able to find what free filing resources are available for you.
Okay. Sam, do you have access to internet? Are you able to do that?
I can go to the library, so thank you, libraries.
Okay.
But yeah, awesome. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Sam, for calling in. Thank you very much. Phone line 1-800-99-NATIVE for anyone else who has questions or comments with regard to tax season this year. And Leslie, I want to go back to you because another change to the tax code this year that's getting a lot of attention is what's been referred to as no tax on car loan interest. And walk us through that deduction.
Yeah, sure. That's a new deduction, so relatively new. I mean, you used to be able to deduct your car loan interest if you itemize. This change doesn't require that you itemize. So, and it's a deduction on interest paid on a loan used to purchase a qualified vehicle for personal use only, and it needs to meet other eligibility criteria. So, for example, the final assembly of the automobile had to take place in the United States, right? And then, and it's for, new cars. It's only for new car loans. And the maximum annual deduction is $10,000. We see, for better or worse, this as being a good deduction for our taxpayers who need it because, unfortunately, the interest rate charged to a lot of our taxpayers in our communities are very high. And so, especially the first couple of years, you can pay a lot of interest. And I'm pretty sure that this deduction is only for the first year of the loan. So it's obviously to encourage folks to buy U.S.-made and assembled automobiles.
Okay. And U.S.-made assembled automobiles, I think you can look at the vehicle identification number and make that determination, right?
That's right. And I think there's a tool, a software tool out there, if you have access to the internet, where you can put in the vehicle ID number and it will tell you where the final assembly took place. You're correct.
All right. Thanks, Leslie. What about student loans? What do we need to be mindful of if we have student loan interest or we're making student loan payments or we have any type of student loan?
Yeah, so student loans, I don't think there are any changes this year, Sean, unless I'm missing something. I'm looking through all my list of changes this year. Student loan interest and student loan, hold on, let me think. Yeah, student loan interest is deductible, but it's based on your income also, and it phases out at a certain amount of income.
Okay. For anyone who watched the Super Bowl over the weekend, they might have seen the advertisement for the Trump accounts. Those are getting a lot of publicity as well. And this is also connected to the tax season. Leslie, tell us more about these Trump accounts and how they connect to tax returns this year.
Sure. So they are new, and there's two components to them, really. Basically, now anyone can open a savings account. It doesn't have to even be a parent. It can be a grandparent, an older sibling can open these savings accounts, and they act a lot like traditional IRAs, right? Same rules. If you open one for a minor, that's who they're intended to be open for. There must be an adult custodian. That's pretty normal. Because children can't own assets. And then, so anyone can open, and these are tax-deferred accounts, just like IRAs. You don't pay tax on it until you withdraw it, and the minor, once they turn 18, can withdraw the funds. There are limitations and restrictions on what you can use the funds on without being taxed, right? So the way that the big thing that's making the headlines with this is that if you have a child that was born between January 1st, 2025 and December 31st, 2028, the IRS the federal government will contribute $1,000 into one of these accounts. And so that is only for that 4-year period. So if you're opening one of these savings account, one of these new savings accounts for a child that was born in 2024, you certainly can do that, but you're not going to be eligible for the seed contribution. And there is a form that you have to file. It doesn't have to be filed with your tax return. It's Form 4547. It's a simple form. It's only in draft format now, so you can use that to set up one of these. Or I think it's beginning in the summer of 2026, you can go online and electronically set up one of these accounts for a minor child.
All right. Now, lots of good information here on our show today. Leslie, there have been some pretty significant employee cuts at the Internal Revenue Service. How does that impact tax season this year in terms of just getting answers to questions or even the speed with which refunds are sent out?
Yeah, so fortunately, as part of the low-income taxpayer clinic community, we meet every week with the other 145 clinics around the country, and so we talk a lot about this. And here's what we're seeing. So at this point, because it's tax filing season and the IRS is going to want to work the returns, right? We're seeing employees being pulled from other areas of the IRS to do that. And what I mean is we have like a practitioner priority services hotline that we can call to talk about our client's problem with the IRS. And those lines, the waits are a lot longer than they used to be. I think yesterday I waited an hour. And folks who are calling into the 1-800, the 829-1040 line, individuals, they're not able to get through right now. So it's making it very difficult for folks to actually communicate with the IRS if they have problems. And it's really early in the filing season. E-File just started on January 26th, so we don't really have a good feel for yet, how quickly those returns are being processed and people are seeing their refunds in their accounts. So we'll know, soon what that's looking like.
All right. Well, here we are, the second week of February, and of course, the filing deadline this year is April 15th, so we're more than 2 months out. But Leslie, let's say for some reason somebody just isn't able to meet that filing deadline. How big a deal is it to get an extension?
It's not a big deal. It's really easy to file an extension. The thing is that if you think you're going to owe taxes, you should also, to the extent you can, file an estimated payment with that extension, right? So, because when you do finally file, you won't be penalized for late filing, but you will be penalized for late payment. So as long as you file the extension, you're safe from the late filing penalty, but not the late payment if you haven't made your payments in a timely manner. You have up to, the statute of limitations for filing your return. So let's just say you're owed a refund and you don't have time to file your return. You should still file an extension. Clearly, you don't have to file an estimated payment with it. And then you have 3 years, after the filing deadline. So folks can still file their 22, 23, and 24 tax returns. The 22 statute of limitation runs on April 18th, 2026. So if you haven't filed your 2022 return and you want to do that, especially if you're getting a refund, you can still do that.
All right. And are old returns, old W-2s, 1099s, any other statements, how long should we hang on to that stuff? How many years?
The belief is, the saying is 7 years, right? And that might be for business, Sean. So I think for individual taxpayers, again, it's 3 years, like the statute of limitations. But if you haven't filed, the IRS can do a substitute for return. So if you haven't filed, you want to hold on to those documents. If you're talking about paper documents, again, we're really turning to digital. So Chelsea and I often just go in to an individual taxpayer's records if they've given us authority, and we can get all that information online.
And with that, we are out of time. We're going to have to wrap up this conversation. But before we do, big thanks to our two guests today, Leslie McLean and also Chelsea Sosi with DNA People's Legal Services Low-Income Taxpayer Clinic. Join us again tomorrow. We'll look at the famed Route 66. This year is the 100th anniversary for the highway that made major changes for tribes along the road. I'm Sean Spruce. You've been listening to the one, the only Native America Calling. Enjoy the rest of your day.
The faculty of tribal colleges and universities support their students in countless ways. They say I believe and offer help before it's asked.
Hear that?
Fully give grace.
That's everything tribal college faculty do for their students on Fast Forward. Because if one tried to say it in real time, they'd be here all day. They teach, guide, comfort, and connect. And for that, the community is grateful. Learn more at mostthoroughdjobdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
They give extensions, share progress, share laughter, create calm, and allow reflection. They inspire hope, share wisdom, guide gently, validate feelings.
Who protects Indian country? Amerind does. As the only 100% tribally owned insurance carrier, Amerind helps strengthen tribal communities by providing reliable insurance coverage and keeping dollars in Indian country. From property and liability to commercial auto and tribal workers' compensation, Amerind is here to protect what matters. Celebrating 40 years of serving Indian country. Learn more at amerind.com. That's AMERIND.com.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Quantic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.